Hello, and welcome to another episode of Purple Ponderings with Pankaj. And today on our show, we have Dan Moore from QBE. I've known Dan for a few years now, and it's been always fascinating when we chat with him. So we're really pleased to have him on board the show today. Dan, for all the viewers, if you can take maybe a couple of minutes, just share your role and your background, and one thing which the world may not know about you.
All right, sure. Yeah, no. So appreciate the opportunity, Pankaj. It's been a pleasure to know you over the years and to talk about some of the emerging technologies and just think about things that are affecting our industry. So as you mentioned, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for QBE North America. QBE is a 130-year-old, $14 billion integrated insurer, specialty insurer. We've got within the North America space, we've got a specialty and commercial operation. We've got alternative markets, which includes our personal lines, our program business, and some of our partnerships there. We've got a great crop business and just a really great franchise there here in North America. And so as we think about my role and responsibility, really covers the operational aspects, and so that includes the what I'll call the core operations, corporate operations, whether that's the real estate, halls and walls, those kinds of things, billing, as well as some of the other aspects of operations like underwriting operations, claims operations. Responsible for the claims organization, responsible for our transformation efforts. QB has spent a significant amount of time and effort over the last number of years transforming various aspects of its operation, notably in the claims space with our Brilliant Basics program, Brilliant Basics underwriting, Brilliant Basics pricing, and Brilliant Basics claims, all three kind of driving a number of great transformations across the organization. And so really excited about that and work closely with our IT organization, which is a global shared service and has a matrix organization into our North America operations as well. So good stuff. By background, I've been in the industry for it keeps getting longer and longer as time goes on, right? I guess that's the thing about getting older. But I've been in the industry for about a little over 15, almost 20 years now. Prior to that, I started my career in consulting, a variety of different types of consulting. Did some system integration, did some management strategy consulting, some operations excellence consulting for a couple of years before that. And actually, undergrad degree is in comparative literature. That might be the first thing that people don't know about me is I did a more classical liberal arts undergraduate degree. Later on, pursued an MBA, but I always thought that the key to a lot of the business is just reading, comprehending, looking for patterns, being able to have that ability to think critically, analyze, and have deep thoughts and conversations with folks about what our problems our customers and employees are facing and how we solve those. Apart from work, and certainly as we kind of end this pandemic period or come to a hopeful close to it, one of the things I've really enjoyed is honing my gardening skills. I'm a big vegetable gardener, not a big vegetable eater per se, but a big vegetable gardener. There's just something about, for me, being able to, take a tiny seed and grow whether it's tomatoes or beans or whatever, squash, whatever that might be. And it works out nicely that my parents are plant strong advocates, and so they eat pretty much anything that I'll produce. However, I on the other hand have not found bacon seeds yet, so I don't eat as much as maybe of mine as I would prefer.
Very nice, very nice. And I was gonna just say that, two things about your passion there. So one, I'm sure that last year you had a lot of time to go and work on your passion because I'm sure keeping you inside with the COVID and all this situation made you do a little bit more of gardening. That's always it's always almost like a mindfulness exercise at some point in time, right? So
Very true.
And then seed becoming big, that's the startup world actually. It relates big time with me. So I just wanted to point that out. That's amazing and awesome.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely. I mean, I love it because it also the law of the harvest is certainly in effect. I mean, what you do today and what how you do it today and how you tend for it and how you cultivate it and grow it certainly influences what you wind up harvesting in the end, right? And there's a lot of external factors influencing that, but the applicability to what we do, kind of in a work setting, is pretty strong. And so but it has great mindfulness, kind of ability just to kind of let all that stuff, that heaviness, kind of leave and just spend some time in the garden.
That's fantastic, Dan. That explains why you're so. I've known you over the years, and you're always calm and grounded. I'm like, where is that coming from? So now I get a sense
The
of
garden.
where that's coming from, the garden. So, uh, you mentioned something in part of your role which was fascinating, which is as the COO, you're obviously tasked with a bunch of different kinds of operations, and you have to work with technology. And over the years, I'm sure you have noticed how that matrix and sort of collaboration works, and sometimes why it doesn't work, how newer technologies are always available. So I'm kind of think, what is your perspective on emerging technologies such as IoT? So
Yeah.
please tell us about it. Yeah.
Yeah, no. So I mean, I think, for a couple thoughts there. I think obviously, the technology world is rapidly changing all aspects of our lives, right? And I think has been for a number of years now. And I think, certainly in the last couple of years, that influence has been accelerating in the insurance world. When I think about, and when I think about technology specifically, like IoT, for example, the concept of a quantified self or a quantified entity, whether it's folks wearing Apple Watches, Garmin devices, or in your homes, Nest and other, Ring and those other types of things. There's just been a dramatic increase in the last number of years in people kind of being able to take those devices which are connected to the internet and be able to use the technology behind that to kind of enhance and improve their life. And so I look at things as simple as, and Nest has been around for a little while, but I use Nest to monitor my home when I was doing business travel, right? Not so much at the present time, but I would use my Nest to monitor from my smartphone what was the temperature, humidity, things like that in my home while I was away. And if I extrapolate that out to, for example, commercial risks, the ability to put sensors on commercial property, on manufacturing equipment, to help to monitor the performance of those processes, those assets, and to be able to provide ambient information about what's happening in those spaces really helps business owners to be able to monitor and manage more effectively those activities, but also provides information that would be greatly leverageable for insurance companies, right? As we start to think about how do we help manage risk, how do we help our clients and customers think about avoiding future claims, and then also accelerating the adjudication of a claim. If you have data about what was happening at a particular facility leading up to and including the time of loss, oftentimes you're able to more quickly establish, for example, in a telematics scenario, what was happening at the automobile when the crash occurred, right? And so we're able to use that information to more accurately pinpoint, the activities to accelerate the adjudication of a claim. And so for those kinds of things, I think there's a great opportunity and acceleration over the last couple of years in emerging technology like IoT. And I think for us, it's important to have two things, I guess. One, an IT organization that is business minded, right? And so I look at, for example, our CIO, Caton Pandit, and his team are very much focused on the KPIs that drive the business. They're thinking about what can we do to help drive efficiency, right? What can we do to help drive effectiveness, create better tools to evaluate risk, to be able to adjudicate the claims, to be able to, whatever those aspects are, how do we think about doing that? And so one is a very business-minded IT organization. I feel very fortunate about that, both at the North America level and at the group level within QBE. And then at the other piece of that is to have what I would call kind of IT and savvy or IT oriented or technology curious, maybe technology curious is a better word, within your employee ranks, right? So how do we have folks within our organization? And it's something we do a lot. We encourage a lot of people to participate in proof of concepts and some of the innovation days that we do. We've also got a program that we've been running for a number of our kind of mid to senior level leaders around digital acceleration and enablement to kind of help them to familiarize themselves with the digital concepts and become more fluid in that conversation regularly. But creating that digital kind of curiosity or that technological curiosity across the organization then allows for individuals to say, hey, I'm doing my day-to-day job and I'm realizing there's an opportunity for leveraging some of the technology that maybe I saw the other day. So for example, RPA for as an example, somebody may be doing something and saying, man, what I'm doing here is a lot of repetitive activity. I'm digitally curious or I'm technologically curious. Let me propose this. This might be an opportunity for RPA. And then folks who are closer to that process can bring that forward. And I think that's a key component for how you leverage both that digital curiosity and technological curiosity at the employee level with a business oriented and a business minded IT organization. Together, they can come together to really help deliver on some of those more emerging technologies. Because sometimes that the emerging technology case isn't always as clear, right? You may need to do some investment for a little while before it starts to really get the traction or the payoff that you need. And so having that kind of combination really helps the organization in that way.
Got it. And I think you said something which is very, very refreshing to hear, which is you look at the technology organization and you're always looking at it from a lens of how can we make the business more effective and or efficient. And because the macro trends are always at play, right? And one of those
Definitely.
two priorities becomes a bigger driver, right, every year, depending upon what's going on outside. So that's very refreshing to hear. I wanted to ask you, because you said that both of these are very important, having a, let's just call it, technology open-minded business executives, right, and coupled with the IT organization. But when it comes to newer technologies, right, there's always like RPA took a while. RPA has been around for a very long time, but that finally it took a while and took off. So if I were to have you, from your vantage point, look at IoT and go, here's what needs to happen in the industry for it to become mainstream, right? So from your perspective, what do you think would be one
Oh,
thing or two things?
that's a great question, right? So, and I think sometimes, I mean, the RPA conversation's probably been a even faster turn. I think back even just to some of the bits that, like I was involved in the .com era,
Yeah.
previously, and I think if you remember during .com, certainly, well, several things. One of the high-profile .com flameouts, grocery store, Peapod grocery store delivery, right?
Yeah.
Yet here we are, literally 20 years later, and I would imagine that most of your listeners here today have been getting grocery delivery, if not, to their home, certainly probably grocery store pickup, right? So they're no longer doing the grocery shopping that they were doing before, and so sometimes it requires, I think, a longer runway than we realize, and maybe an existential shock or a big change in the way we think and kind of index on things. At the same, and I'll even use Amazon for example. I mean, Amazon literally was, in 2001, the early 2000s, selling books, right? And had they remained selling books, they would not be the juggernaut they are today. And in fact, part of how they became what they are today was, Bezos essentially sending out an email to customers saying, what would you buy if you could buy anything on Amazon? What would you buy? And getting back responses that included things like windshield wipers. And he realized that people are wanting to buy whatever's on top of mind, and creating this mega superstore is what ultimately, listening to customers and creating that demand. When I think about IoT, I think some of those same challenges are there, right? I mean, the question becomes, one, where are the business cases, and what is, I mean, like, I think sometimes early technology, and I think this happened as well in the .com, and it happens a little bit with IoT, lend itself to a little more the novelty or the curiosity, right? Like, oh, we're going to connect your toaster oven to the internet, right? Um, and you start thinking, do I really need a toaster oven connected to the internet, right? And the answer to that is probably not, and certainly not today. And maybe you haven't thought about all those cases. But as you start to think, more extrapolate more beyond that, then you start to say, well, but would it be interesting to have a water shut off service connected to the internet that might notify me or my insurer or the water company that maybe there's a leak? Oh, well, that becomes interesting. And a lot of those, and that maybe is a more difficult challenge to attack than saying, just can I connect my toaster to the internet, right? And so sometimes those novelty kind of early examples, which sometimes happened in the .com era as well, paved the way for what I'll call more serious, more value add type of uses of the innovation, right? And so when I think particularly around, for example, in commercial risks, for a long time we've had highly protected commercial risks, sprinkled, burglared, all sorts of different kinds of monitoring systems and whatnot. But historically, those monitoring systems have been very expensive, costly. There's a reason why not every commercial building has some of those capabilities. And so part of that for me is then saying, as IoT becomes cheaper, how do we help the commercial landlords and real estate owners start to understand the benefits that come from that. Similarly, on the devices for example, for manufacturing activities, as you start to transition from toasters talking to your phone to maybe a bottler, for example, a beverage bottler having its line talk to its system. Those controls have been in place for a long time. System automation controls, but IoT, I think, provides the opportunity for the price of those controls to come down, become more accessible in a broader array, instead of being able to be deployed at more specific points. So I think very long-winded way of saying, probably pricing has to come down. More business cases have to be kind of established for usage. And then I think one of the last pieces for me is, and particularly this strikes as I think about the personal lines example or personal space, there's a lot of competing standards, if you will, right? And so one of the challenges that I've seen is if I look at my personal lines customers, and frankly even commercial customers, they're all using something different, and they're all, in many cases, the feedback that they're providing are different, and there's not always a way for us to aggregate and create a central store for that and be able to act on that in a centralized way. And so how do you think about creating some standards for communication, conversation around that? And I'm sure there's work that I'm not yet aware of around that space that folks are doing to help set some of those standards up. But part of that is creating that awareness and creating that ubiquity, if you will, for folks to be able to have that interaction.
Yeah. So business value, economics, and what we refer to in the industry as interoperability problem, which is what, by the way, Purple Land has done some work in that area. And
absolutely.
We can talk about that. But you're right in terms of those are some good observations. I think that resonates with what we're seeing as well. And this is the long haul, as you said. Like Instagram is the new Peapod, if you think about it. Oh, sorry, Instacart.
Yeah,
right? Instacart is just doing what Peapod used to do. And so sometimes it's a matter of timing as well, right?
Very much so.
So you're doing the right thing, but are you doing it at the right time is something that, because Google was not the first, Facebook was not the first, but all these are,
Yeah, and sometimes it's about changing your mental model, right? I mean, I think folks like I think Amazon and Zappos changed people's mental model about shipping, right? For example, in e-commerce, and I think as people, so you sometimes you have to just kind of keep turning the economic and the business model until the gears fit, right? Because sometimes it's just thinking about things in a slightly different way in order to see a path forward. And I think that's certainly the case with some of the new technology, whether it's IoT, whether it's AI, some of those other things. I mean, there's clear, easy business cases, but some of it may require us to continually rethink some of the assumptions we've made in the past about how we operate our business.
Yeah, and that triggers actually a good question in my mind, which is an observation that one of the things that you also need apart from these three things to happen for the mainstream adoption of the technology is also the leadership mindset, right? This mindset to be open to trying something new. And right, that's something that we've always seen. Like insurance industry is not known as being full of those transformative, like not people are generally more risk averse because that's what the industry has been, right? People are slower to adopt new changes, but once they come in, then it stays, right? That's how I tell everybody that I meet that it's hard to change, but once it changes, it stays. It's not easy to then go back. But a lot of the newer insurtechs, right? People are coming out and building full stack startups, right? That are competing in the personal line space, certainly in the small commercial space. I've not yet seen many in the mid or the large commercial space, but they will, I'm sure, come one day. And those are, I think, now posing a potential view of, look, it is possible, right? So if you're an incumbent, you can look at them and go, okay, it is possible. So should we now do something more and more? I just wondered from your perspective, this mindset, this leadership mindset, openness, right? Being willing to uh, try, right? How much of that have you seen change in the industry? Like, what's your perspective as you've been around for some time? Has that changed at all,
Yeah,
or is it the same?
it's a good question. I certainly think, I think that there's a greater willingness to accept, kind of the influence of technology more generally. And I think that's growing. I think that's also growing as you just see increasingly people who have come of age with technology being a greater part of their lives, moving into some of the leadership roles within those organizations, right? And so that's a natural extension of that. I think certainly some of the innovator, early mover innovators that you reference, full stack solutions have kind of gone out and demonstrated the potential, right? I think when you look at the relative, they're still. I think they're still at the potential stage because when you look at the size of, for example, a State Farm, a Progressive, a Geico, I mean, that market is a really big market, and we're still really talking, you know, rather small portions that are being kind of changed by this bit. But what I do see is increasingly organizations, taking lessons, and where I think some of those early adopters and early business models have really done a great job is whether or not they survive the long run and live to the potential of what they think they will be, or they get consumed or bought out or whatever the case may be. I think they've done a really great job in creating a dialogue around what's the art of the possible, and I think advancing people's thinking. I mean, certainly, there's more conversation today around straight through claims processing, post Lemonade's puffy code example, than there
Yeah.
was prior to that, right? Now, some of that is, I think, that the conversation is coming out and being had more publicly than it was before. But some of that is, I think, they've been able, firms like that have been able to challenge some of the mental model, to use your word, or kind of the how to think about the leadership aspect of things, and been able to create, some of that dialogue. And so you see firms like, Amica, USAA, and others who are coming out with some really great digital assets to support that. And, QB is no different. I think, when I look at our crop business, for example, we've got some really great digital assets that we've been deploying in our crop space. When I think about some of the work we've been doing in the alternative market space, building out APIs and basically thinking about a world where, rather than asking customers to come to our assets, we give them the ability to embed our capabilities into their assets so that we're able to be part of their process, a natural flow versus stopping, coming out, interacting with QBE, and then coming back in? How do we become a natural part of their existing process through API and other digital technologies? And that to me is, I think part of that example. But yeah, I think the world is changing, and I think what we're seeing is a greater adoptance of that and kind of acceptance of that. I think also the other thing you're seeing is some of the early movers were more oriented to maybe Silicon Valley folks who were thinking about this is this massive disruption opportunity, and let me come in and take a swing at it. And I think they've definitely changed some people's paradigms and mental models. And what you see now is more insurance professionals who maybe have a deeper knowledge of insurance, taking those ideas and those kind of disruptive things, leveraging their deep insurance knowledge, which I think is one of the differentiators for when I think about some of the insure techs and whatnot. Those that I see that are doing, that I see doing a little bit, maybe gaining the traction, are those that are able to take the ideas that the disruptors are putting out there, but ground it in some real insurance expertise and be able to deliver on that promise, right? And so I think you're seeing more folks come out of the industry with creative ideas and building on ideas that others have had, and being able to bring that insurance expertise to the market to be able to help advance those ideas. And that to me also helps with the adoption, because it's one thing to have somebody who doesn't know underwriting, for example, come tell you about how they're going to change underwriting. It's another thing to have a former underwriter who did the job, knows the job, understands the challenges and some of the opportunities, come to you and say, this is why I put this solution together, because I understood the challenge of not being able to effectively triage, of not being able to effectively get all the, be able to evaluate all the risks on a schedule in a timely manner, of not having digital or remote loss control, or any of those kinds of challenges that might be out there. And those are some of the opportunities that I think bringing that insurance expertise to the emerging technology and the startup world is creating some opportunity for.
Fantastic. Awesome. So on that note, Dan, we're gonna move into the second part of our conversation, which is for the audience to know a little bit more about you.
Sure.
So my first question on those lines are, what is your most proudest achievement and your biggest learning so far?
Oh wow, that's a that's always a tough one. I mean, I think personally, from a personal standpoint, I think my kids obviously are one of my proudest achievements thus far, and will always be that way. Professionally, I think for me, a big part of that was just is just the looking at where the individuals on the teams that we've built over the years are today, right? And I look at folks who are leading claims organizations across this industry, folks who are in a variety of underwriting leadership roles, other executive roles, folks who are on executive some of our like general executive adjusters and others, just folks who have, people who've been parts of our team and ability to support and help those folks grow their career and have an influence more broadly on the industry. That's probably the number one thing that I'm most proud about, is just looking across and seeing where the folks that we've worked with have been able to grow and build into their career, and just recognizing that, being proud of the opportunity to have been part of that experience for them and supporting them in that process. And I think, from a project or a launch standpoint, I think I was certainly proud of our QBE team and being well ahead of kind of the pandemic and whatnot in terms of virtual adjudication. We were doing virtual adjudication several years ago. So when the pandemic came and folks were pivoting to virtual adjudication, that was something that we didn't really have to think twice about. It was already part of our tool set, and we were already doing it, and so it enabled us to almost move seamlessly into a pandemic world. And so proud of the team and the work that they had done to anticipate that kind of a shift and change. And so those are all. I mean, it's hard to pinpoint one, Pankaj, as you well know. But certainly those are some of the ones that I would look at.
Got it. And I can tell you that from a learning standpoint, I have certainly learned, another way of think about a simple thing as gardening, right? How that can be, can teach you so much
Oh, for sure.
work life, etc. So that's awesome. Dan, you travel as part of your job. You have to be knowledgeable about a lot of different things that are happening all around you. So what do you do to keep yourself updated, knowledgeable? Any publications, any books, any magazines? Like, tell us a little bit about how you keep yourself
Yeah,
updated.
sure. Well, I think the first thing to recognize is you're never going to know enough, right? And I mean, a lot of that is really around surrounding yourself with smart people who are equally curious and who are consuming, because 10, 15 people who can be curious and read can cover a lot more ground than that, and ask questions and think big things can certainly do more than just myself alone, right? And so a big part of that is creating a whether that's within your existing team, whether that's part of a kitchen cabinet, or other advisory type function, having folks that you interact with on a regular basis who spur your thinking. Obviously, certainly there's a number of industry publications that you can pick up, whether it's carrier management or any of the other kind of publications, and you can obviously go after whether it's the more IT oriented side of the house, the more underwriting oriented side of the house, or maybe the more claims oriented. There are industry publications for all of that. I certainly enjoy Dowling produces a lot of great reports.
How about who do you follow? So are there people
Oh,
in the industry that you look?
yeah, I mean, well, I think so. I pursue a lot of the LinkedIn threads that you can pick up the hashtag InsurTech and other things. Certainly there's a lot of folks. Some of our friends over at Rob Beller and Lee Boyd doing the FNO
FNO, yeah.
podcast, which I think has had a lot of great folks on, and friends of ours, and certainly appreciate the work they do there. It's interesting. I think similar to the work that you do, obviously listening to your podcasts and video casts. On LinkedIn, you can follow Mateo Carbone is certainly big on the telematics. A lot of content there, but there's a lot of other interesting folks that are producing stuff out there as well. And fortunately, I think one of the nice things is LinkedIn produces such a really great area for us to just get a wide variety of those activities, right? And Conning is another great place just to get industry data. There's just a lot of great sources out there along that front. And then hopefully there's a lot of good. The conference industry has done a great job pivoting digitally, right, and remotely. We've seen a lot of the industry events pivoting in that way, and so I think that's been a fantastic opportunity for folks to continue to network with peers and others who are doing interesting things in the industry, and certainly appreciate that. Although I look forward to the opportunity to be back in person with some of those sessions and individuals, and being able to have maybe a more detailed or focused conversation on certain topics like that. And certainly the last year has not been much of a travel year for anybody, or in-person year for anybody. But I expect that, as we think about like ITC coming up here in the fall, that's going to be one that, assuming everything goes as planned, will be an
Yeah.
awesome opportunity for folks to get back together again and talk about, emerging technology and technology that's changing the insurance landscape. And look forward to, those are great opportunities to network and talk to folks who are doing interesting things and what they're thinking about.
Got it. Got it. Awesome. Uh, Dan, I always ask this question about you. You mentioned that you do watch this podcast, and we have
Yeah.
different kind of guests. Who would be some people that you think we should get on the guests that you would want to watch?
Oh, that's interesting. So I would actually, I mean, I guess I think of a couple of things. I mean, and probably a bit of my background is that I didn't, I came from outside the insurance industry, right? And so for probably the first half of my insurance industry career was colored very much by the fact that I had been, in a lot of other industries, right? On the consulting basis, I'd been in pharmaceutical, been in health insurance. I had been in government entities. I'd done a lot of high tech media, and so was able to bring a lot of different ideas from those industries to insurance, which you know 20 years ago wasn't really thinking about some of those things, right? And so I think when I think about that, I think that's certainly one of the recommendations I have for anybody who's thinking about doing some of these is how do you bring on some folks who maybe don't have the insurance lens so firmly affixed like I do or some others do, right? Because after a certain amount of time in insurance, starts to all kind of look, the challenge is real, and so I think being able to bring, whether it's customers in who can talk about what kinds of insurance things they need. It'd be great to have, like, for example, as we talked about IoT earlier, have a couple of commercial property managers come in and talk about what are some of the challenges of managing risks in commercial property, and how might IoT or other technologies support them, and how do they think about it, right? Because I think those creates interesting dialogue and dynamic that allow folks to come in and think about that. I think it's be interesting to have folks who are doing AI work outside of the insurance industry. How are you applying AI in finance? How are you applying AI in retail, for example, right? Because people are doing some really interesting things in AI in retail, and what implications might that have for us as we think about use cases and business cases in insurance? Because I think sometimes we get very caught up in talking to ourselves about what we're doing in the industry, right? And you start looking at business cases and use cases across the industry, and a lot of them start to look and feel very similar, right? And there's a lot of Me Too-isms that start to develop, so I think kind of creating that, in addition to all the great folks that are coming on that are in that vein, like myself, right? Although I wouldn't put myself in the great category, just in that vein category. I would say creating that richness and diversity of experience and ideas, right? And so that's probably diversity of background, diversity of experience, diversity of industry. Those would be things that I would look to see, and it would be interesting to me to see in more podcasts and video casts, etc.
Got it. Well, that's something to think about. And you're right. It's all about figuring out all of the different stakeholders who need to participate, like in the commercial space, you said,
Absolutely.
Property managers, property owners, commercial property owners. Those are also brokers, right?
Yep.
Those are interesting stakeholders. And we've had a couple of brokers, but yeah, that's something that we're going to think about a little bit more. All right. So with that, we come to the last question on today's show. And this is a rapid fire round, Dan. So what I do is I'm going to give you two choices, simple choices.
All right.
And you to be very quick with thinking which one appeals to you and why. The why is important to me.
The why is important. Yep.
Why is important. All right. So with that, let's start. Baseball or football?
Oh, baseball. I like the strategy behind it. I probably like the weather too, right? I mean, there's something about sitting in the stands in the summertime with your buddies, watching the game. There's just something about the strategy behind it just is really good. Great football game's fun too, but definitely a baseball guy.
Yeah, and given that you're from St. Louis, I mean, you got something to
Cardinals.
cheer for.
Go Cardinals.
So, Superman or Spider-Man?
Ooh, tough. I think I'd go Superman, right? There's something about first I like flying, right? I mean, Superman's great, he's swinging on a web, but the flight kind of doesn't require anything else out there. It's just up in the air, flying, saving people, super strength, all those good things. I don't know, there's something about that.
Got it. Dog or cat?
Oh, dog. Highly allergic to cats. Highly allergic to cats. So even if they're cute and cuddly, I just can't do it. I gotta go dog.
Got it. Paper books or ebooks, like Kindles?
Oh, tough. Paper books. Much prefer reading in paper. I enjoy the tactile experience. Probably a function of and part of having done an undergraduate degree in comparative literature and reading a lot of books pre ebook. But I will give credit to ebooks for being able to slide a couple hundred books into my my laptop bag with an e-reader. So there is an advantage there, but I still prefer the book.
Got it. Golf or tennis?
Oh, golf. Not because I play well, but because as a kid, I used to work in on the golf course construction and maintenance side of the house. So I used to build golf courses when I was a kid, and
Nice.
I've always had a fascination. I don't play well, but I have a great affection for the aesthetic of golf courses.
Yeah, I don't play well either, and I always say that don't mistake passion for talent.
Very
Right?
good, very good.
And so the final one is, and this is pretty relevant given that we've been stuck within our homes, but vacation wise, Iceland or Hawaii?
Oh man, that's an impossible choice. uh, Feeling like you get stuck in the house feels like you want to go to Hawaii, but I'm gonna pivot here and I'm gonna go Iceland because I really think I would love to see the Northern Lights. That would be on my high on my list. So I'd love to see the Northern Lights.
Awesome, awesome. Well, with that, we come to an end of this show. This was fascinating conversation, Dan. Thank you. Any last words for our listeners?
No, I appreciate the opportunity, Pankaj, and appreciate the professional relationship and friendship over the years, and look forward to continued conversations about topics just like these.
Awesome. Same here. And so thank you, Dan, for being on our show. And to all our listeners, we'll soon be back with another episode. Till then, stay tuned. All the best. Bye bye.